flying by this week on the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH media platform. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil, and yes, folks, I want to talk football. I know you want to talk football, and especially if you're local. What's going on with those Ticats all of a sudden? Yes, it's only 4 wins for the season, but there's a renewed interest, and of course, everyone's talking about the possibility of playoffs. And this week alone, they will be playing the Toronto Argonauts, their QEW rivals, at BMO Field with another opportunity of sweeping the series. So we're talking CFL football, we're talking Canadian football, and when I think of Canadian football, I can only think of one particular person, our good old friend from 3DownNation, and of course, former CHCH anchor on the weekend when it comes to sports, Justin Dunk. Thanks for joining us, partner.
Good to be with you, dude. Back on the red couch.
It's always great to talk to you because I know you're the kind of guy that's always in the know, and I know you're doing all kinds of different things. You're doing podcasts all over, your own podcast on 3DownNation. I see you on multiple other networks as well, too, so we're actually happy that you're in here to talk to us about the Canadian Football League. But you're also doing something different this year. For a couple of years, I've been doing the pre and post game stuff with the Hamilton Ticats, which is an experience in itself. But you have taken it to the next level with a team with a fan base that I would say, if not equals, might be even more fandom than the Hamilton Ticats.
I'll say that with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, that fan base rivals any in professional sports across the globe. Bubba, you could travel and go to the other side of the world or go down to the sunny spots where people like to go to in the winter, like Mexico or something, and probably see green and white. Somebody wearing Riders gear. In fact, Corey Mace, when he first took over as the head coach of the Riders, I think it was actually Mexico he went to, and he saw somebody wearing green and white. So this fan base is unlike any other, and that's not to put Tiger Cats fans down because we know how passionate they are about their team, but they literally live and die with this football team. And based on what I've heard out there, people also feel like, it affects the local economy in Saskatchewan as well. So they're so tied into it from many angles.
What made you get involved?
To be quite honest, it was the fact that Harvard Media, who owns 620 CKRM, which is a station that has the radio rights broadcast for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, their commitment to doing this project to a high level. So they have obviously for years had the radio rights and just done that from an audio perspective, but they wanted to have a pregame and postgame show that was video. And we started with the home games. We just recently, for the Labor Day rematch, tried out an away game in terms of doing the live stream broadcast. Because, as you know from TV, there's a lot that goes into video production. So the fact that they were willing to commit, use the broadcast people that I wanted to use out there, Bamboo Shoots, and the producer that I've worked with out there doing Canada West University games for years, Dave Roberts, and bring them in, made me say, okay, I think this huge undertaking is doable, especially when it's going to be seen and heard and watched, especially by all these fans in Rider Nation.
I do a pregame show that is an hour before kickoff, and then we conclude with a half an hour postgame show. The fandom is that insane that you could be on the air for how long?
Oh my gosh. Pre-game, it's 3 hours. And that has become, something I've gotten used to. But it's great because people care. So they're tuning in for the whole 3 hours. And for the uninitiated, out in Regina at Mosaic Stadium, the fans that come there to the home games, over 50% of the fans that come there are from outside of Regina. So we're talking about a truly provincial team out there. So the fans will listen, or in this case, watch that as they're coming in. And then the post-game show can go for 2.5, 3+ hours because people are calling in about what's happening with the team, the game that just took place, the moves that they want to see made, everything, man. Like, you could literally, I think, probably go for 4, 5, or 6 hours if you wanted to, because these fans are so passionate about the team. But full credit, again, I feel like it bears repeating, to Harvard Media, 620 CKRM, George Leith, who's a managing partner over there, who had this vision to put this together, because I think it's really resonated with the fans, and I'm sure you could speak to this, Bubba, that it's going to up the level around the league for other people who are doing a pre or post game show.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I think one of the keys and the chemistry things of watching a good broadcast is obviously who you're working with. And I mean, a guy like Wes Cates is just so well respected in that community.
He is awesome, man. Like, super chill dude. Would have never known that this guy is a multiple-time Grey Cup winner, that he is one of the best running backs of his era with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, has no ego about him, and it was this seamless transition. As you know from being in the broadcast world, sometimes it takes time to develop a chemistry with somebody, but Wes is so easy to get along with that right from day one, it was very simple for us. Now, we've definitely gotten better as time has gone along. We can read each other's verbal cues, and we can just look at each other now and know what we're going to say or what I'm going to set him up with. But he has been amazing. The guy is underrated. I've said this to him multiple times. I'm like, you should be on TSN, man. You should be on the panel. The way that you carry yourself, the way that, I think he's underrated in terms of the jokes that he cracks. Perhaps a bunch of those are off air, but still, he is a guy that I think has an arrow pointing up in broadcasting.
And I think of the guys I work with, right? Like, I work with some really, really strong former players that have turned into broadcasters. I had Rob Hitchcock last week. Mike Daly is a guy. Fan Twos, obviously, prior to him. Luke Tasker has become an outstanding analyst in-game with RJ Broadhead. But I think what's really good, in terms of the broadcasting, and I think you're starting to see this too, or at least your experience with Wes, and you can tell us about this, is that it's so hard for these guys because they're not too far out of the game. But they also, to be a good analyst, they have to learn that you can be fair, but at times you have to criticize players.
Definitely. And I think that's the real key, as you said, between a good analyst and a great analyst. Wes Cates, for example, is not afraid to call a spade or call something out that he sees. Whereas from what I've noticed, to your point about the players who are just out of it, they don't want to come down hard because they're so used to seeing the media, right? We always get referred to as the media.
You guys.
Yeah, as these like big, bad people that are out to get them, which is a whole other conversation, but it's not the case. So I think it takes some time to be removed from that. And I think that's part of the reason why Wes Cates is so good. And I'll shout out Mike Daly because I think he's been really good with you guys. And the key to me is that he's very well spoken, right? When you can formulate the thoughts that you have into your mind into something that even the average fan, or I would argue non-football fan, can understand, that's when you're really starting to pull people in. That's what Daly's really good at, and Wes Cates too.
Yeah, it really is, and it's a skill that I think people think, as you said, use the word underrated. It's hard. It's really, really hard to be able to do that. Exactly like you said, feeling here, mind, think, come out of your mouth. Like that whole process. And it's got to be instant in a lot of cases, right? Because guys like us are just going to, here's the question. We're setting you up for something like that. And the way these guys respond is just unbelievable. Hey, let's talk about the team there. But before we get to the Ticats, I want to talk about the Riders, right? I mean, under old Coach Dickinson, there are some times where I think this time of the year have not been good in Regina because they've experienced some long spells of losing, which in some cases have knocked them out of the playoffs, or their run in the playoffs has been very, very short. Corey Mace got off to a real quick start as the head coach and became, I think, a big CFL darling, quite honestly. And not that he didn't deserve it, because he deserved this shot to be a head coach, in my opinion, coming out of being a defensive coordinator with the Argonauts. Wow. Winless in 7? Who saw this coming?
Not a lot of Rider Nation, that's for sure, especially when Mace started his coaching career 5-1. Now you're winless in 7 straight, as you alluded to. One of those was a tie in Ottawa. But 5 of the 6 losses, Bubba, have come by 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, and 5 points. So they've hit for some sort of a grand slam there in those losses. We're talking very thin margins that this team has lost by, but at the end of the day, it's professional sports and it's still a loss. And you get paid to win football games. So I think if you look at this team from the overall perspective, and you mentioned the Craig Dickinson era, the last 2 years he was there, if I have my stats right, I don't think his teams won a game after Labor Day. And that really didn't give them any chance to make the playoffs when you go on a streak like that. Fortunately for Mace's group in his first year, there are 5 games left. They have the opportunity still to control their destiny in terms of the playoff fate. 2 matchups against Calgary. They get Ottawa and BC at home, which should help, and they have to go to Edmonton. So if you can stay above the Tiger Cats for potentially crossing over, and Calgary and Edmonton, that obviously means that 6 teams are in the CFL, and those 3 could be out. That's what the Riders have to be looking at. But the West Division is so crowded that if they turn it around and sort of throw it back to earlier in the season, that they could be hosting a home playoff game.
What's with the role reversal? We've always deemed the West as being the best in the Canadian Football League. Always, teams maybe with 1 or 2 losses at the top and in third place, secure in the playoffs. Right now, it's just a canister of teams, even down to where Calgary is. If they got hot, who knows where they could end up.
You're right. I mean, if Jake Maier could play consistent football, I think Calgary could be really good. But, that's a whole other thing. I think what's changed here is, especially the stability in the East Division, right? You have Danny Machocha and Jason Moss who are in lockstep. Cody Fajardo, yes, has kind of been in and out of the lineup a little bit, but they've shown that they can bring in new pieces there that fit the system that Moss runs on offense, that Nothorpe runs on defense, and can still play, right? This is an Alouettes team that, went a number of games without Cody Fajardo as a starter, and Davis Alexander steps in and plays well, which good. I think actually he was. Downgrades Cody Fajardo's MOP campaign because you're like, well, this other guy can step in and play at a similar level to you. And you look at the defense there in Montreal, Sean Lemon is dealing with this gambling thing, but it hasn't caused that defense to miss a beat. I think it's kind of a no-name defense. In Toronto, you have Ryan Dinwiddie, who's been a constant there. Yes, some of the staff has turned over with Corey Mace going to Saskatchewan, but to me, that's been a real key. You look at Ottawa, Bob Dice has been there for a couple of years now, and even more than that when he was the interim guy. So I think that that's really helped, and they all have a legit number 1 quarterback. I'm not saying you can't say that about out west, but I think where things have changed and flipped is it wasn't the dominant start or team that we're used to seeing from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I think that kind of flips the win-loss category. Yeah, they're getting old, but, they're still right there. Yeah. First place in the West Division.
It's hard to believe.
The sexy pick was the BC Lions, who've had their issues. Vernon Adams Jr. started hot, didn't look so great. Nathan Rourke comes in, and everybody thought he was just going to come back and play right away. And, I want to say this, Bubba, pro athletes are humans too. Right? We think they're robots and they're just going to go in there and perform to the highest level. Nathan Rourke came back to the BC Lions after he had learned multiple NFL playbooks where he just kind of left his dream to potentially die in the NFL to come back to the CFL in a whirlwind week, and we're expecting him to be at this level that he was at the year prior that he was in the CFL where he set it on fire. I just don't think it's fair sometimes that we think pro athletes can be robots.
Yeah, I think that's its own situation in itself, because I think without doing it on purpose, there is a bit of a quarterback controversy there. And the only reason why I say that, and you help me out if I'm right in this sort of mindset that I have, is that when you look up and down the roster, I believe there's only one receiver that Nathan Rourke played with in his days in that 22 season.
Keon Hatcher, and he was just kind of coming up.
There you go. So the rest of them, I don't think they would ever say this in a microphone, but in their mind or amongst each other, VA's my guy. So in this situation, I feel like I won't call it a controversy, but it's kind of sticky.
It is a controversy. I mean, Rick Campbell gets asked about it on a weekly basis, if not daily when he's available to the media. And when you have a guy like Vernon Adams Jr., who was playing at an MOP level for the first handful of games, definitely wasn't after that. But when you know what he can be, and then Nathan Rourke comes in and isn't great to start, but has played better of late, led them to some key wins, then there's going to be that talk. And I think there's something to be said what you're mentioning there with the receivers, that like you go through training camp with a guy like Vernon Adams Jr. or back it up to the offseason when he's flying guys in to have team sessions and building that rapport, that yeah, there's a chance, and I'm not saying this is the case from a fact perspective, but there's a chance that that locker room is divided between who they want to see at quarterback, just simply because you have Nathan Rourke parachuting in, and who's this guy coming back from the NFL so quickly, and he's going to start right away this week. Like a lot of people thought that was maybe not putting him in the best chance to succeed, right, or arguably the team to succeed. And oh, by the way, you're going to make him the highest paid quarterback, not just by a little bit, by a freaking country mile. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but what message does that potentially send to the rest of your team?
Interesting situation out there. Let's turn to the home team here. Okay. It's been an interesting season, and I know that you kind of watch. You're all over the league. There are a lot of I think we're at this point right now. We're looking back at the season and saying, boy, lost to Saskatchewan early in the year. I think there was the season opener in Calgary. There was a last-second loss to Winnipeg, a last-second loss to Ottawa. Boy, if the Tiger Cats had won a couple of those games, they wouldn't be in the situation that they are in. But there's a good feeling all of a sudden. You put together back-to-back wins, and I know it's only 2 wins, but is there reason to start even talking about possible playoffs?
I think so. The crossover's wide open. The Tiger Cats control their destiny in that regard. And I do think that there is that feeling when I talk to people around the league that the Ticats are potentially dangerous in the way that they've been playing. And we've seen some of the playmakers step up. I'll say Tim White has been more consistent of late. I know he was getting a lot of the blame for some of those early losses you mentioned with the drop passes that he had. And you know, with them, you talk about the quarterback position, it's so interesting what's kind of gone on there that Bo Levi Mitchell, statistically, is having arguably by far the best CFL season of any quarterback in the league. Mm-hmm. But then Taylor Powell gets inserted, and it seemed like I should say that was the way Scott Milanovic wanted to go. But then he has the unfortunate injury, has to go to the hospital, and it's back to Bo Levi Mitchell. Like, the fact that they have dealt with that and Bo has been a true pro, I think has helped this team at least be in a position where they could have a chance to get in the playoffs. Just that chance down the stretch.
I think a big difference that I'm seeing, too, is, and I didn't know what I thought. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'll say it. When Chris Jones was announced as a defensive coordinator, the Tiger Cats are like, oh, God, are you kidding me? What, after disaster, what was it, 8-30 as a head coach? I'm probably pretty close there.
It was bad.
It was not good. And a fan base that was ripped apart with the double E. But, boy, it's proving to me that all his acumen as a defensive coordinator, long before he became a general manager, president of football operations, that this guy is a defensive mind at heart. And whatever he's doing, it's working with the Tiger Cats.
I've believed for a little while now that Chris Jones could still be a defensive guru if that was his focus. Being a general manager, being a head coach is much different. And especially being a head coach, you sort of set the leadership tone for your entire team. And it was very clear in Edmonton that how he was trying to go about that wasn't working. But as a defensive guy who's very aggressive and demanding and downright cutthroat with some of the player decisions that he can make, I think that works, because on defense you have to be like that in terms of your mentality. So even though I had a similar thought to you of, really, he's back in the league already?
And yeah, it was so fast.
Yeah, like, it didn't seem like that was a move that was going to happen really anytime soon, or not this season, but that he's proven some of those naysayers wrong and proven my thought right, where I thought he still has it as a defensive guru, so to speak, and he's showing with the Ticats.
Can you just clarify something? I know a lot of people have been asking me, and I know you are way more versed on the league sort of things, or whatever happened when he left Edmonton or when he departed from Edmonton. I hear he's not getting paid by the Tiger Cats. Is it a contract thing with Edmonton, or they allow him? Like, because would he have not still been under contract? How does that all work?
From what I've heard on Chris Jones' contract situation, it was sort of evolving over time with the Edmonton Elks. I almost said the old name. With the Edmonton football team, we'll say. But from people I've talked to, he got to a place where whenever he was let go, he had a year payout after that. So if the Ticats are going to pay him money, that would, just like any other sport, right, take away from what Edmonton would have to pay him. And I'm sure Jones doesn't mind having Edmonton pay him because they let him go to work for the Ticats.
Yeah, it's been a real big difference. Another thing I want to bring up here, and I know it's become a constant conversation in the National Football League, the Canadian Football League, and I know it's probably something that's very sensitive for you too as a former quarterback at Guelph University, is the protection of quarterbacks. We've seen guys like Chris Streveler. We've seen guys like, Winnipeg as well, too. We'll go with Zach Collaros taking a hit to the head. Obviously, we're looking at Chris Streveler out right now. I believe he reported 3 of the top 4 ligaments in his knee were torn on this particular hit. This particular player was fined. Is that enough for player safety in the league?
Man, this is a whole topic unto itself, but that was Miles Brown, Saskatchewan Roughriders defensive lineman, who had been fined the week before for hitting Zach Collaros high in the Labor Day Classic. And I was there talked to Brown face-to-face about that hit with Claris, and his description and talking about his intent on that play made me think that he didn't mean to hit Claris the way that he did. And if you go back and watch the film, the way that Brown describes it matches up with him not putting the full force into Claris on that play. I know it ended up knocking him from the game, and we want to protect the quarterbacks, but I felt like a fine was warranted there. The other part of this, and Trevor Harris said this to me, is that it's almost like defenders now have to be like Neo from The Matrix. That 300-plus pound men have to be able to stop on a dime, right? Quarterback throws the ball or they slide or what have you to avoid these quarterbacks. And it's like, where can you hit them? Yep. You know, this play that we just saw a number of times on Strevler, I didn't think was egregious, right? He's engaged with the Blue Bombers offensive lineman, going to the ground. It's not like he's diving with his helmet pointing right at Strevler's knee. I can understand from Winnipeg's perspective why they'd be so upset, but as much as we want to try to protect the quarterbacks, I think we've got to realize that other football players need to be protected as well, and that it's become really difficult for defenders to try to even hit the quarterback in some sort of way at any sort of time, right? Miles Brown on that play is expecting a quarterback sneak. So he's shooting the gap for the uninitiated, trying to get leverage, realizes something different is happening when Strevler drops back and it looks like he's going to pass. And oh, by the way, Strevler's a running quarterback too. So how do you make those split-second decisions as a defender to get into the strike zone? Like, injuries are going to be a part of football. To me, this one wasn't egregious.
It makes me think of, I believe, was that Saskatchewan and Ottawa that played to the first tie of the season? The continuance of the game by a linebacker that's coming through and gets low-bridged and falls into was it Dustin Crum?
Yeah, Jacoby McLean got cut blocked, as you said, and flies into him, and there's a penalty call. It's like, how is he supposed to control his body?
What was he supposed to do?
Exactly.
And, and this was in overtime, and everyone thought the game was over. Remember, it was a sack, game over, celebration. Players are on their field shaking hands, and then the referee's go, sorry, the game's still going on.
Yeah. Coaches were in the elevator going down to the locker room. They had to go back up. But to your point, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect quarterbacks, because ultimately those are the meal tickets for these franchises. Those are the guys, for the most part, I don't want to discredit the other players on the team, that the fans are paying their money to see. But it also is football. So I'm trying to balance this out on both sides. This was not a Garrett Marino on Jeremiah Masoli situation.
Yeah, that was
far from it, right?
For sure.
We can understand the intent there. Garrett Marino, I don't think, did a great job at all of explaining his thoughts, at least on that play.
His immediate behavior after the hit, too, also was
exactly.
Pathetic,
So that would make this a very different conversation. But I do think the league has done a pretty solid job within their control of trying to protect the quarterbacks. Because as a defender, man, like, where do you try to hit these guys?
I don't know. I don't know what defensive linemen are going to do any longer. I don't know what defensive backs are going to do. How do you not get PI on every single play as a cornerback? You basically have to let them, especially because these wide receivers now are all going 6'4", 240, and the DBs are about 6 feet quick. I don't know how you the flag will fly every single time. It's impossible.
Look at the Ticats with making the switch from Terry Godwin to Shamar Bridges, right?
Yeah.
That was mostly size. And I know he's got some other skills as well, obviously.
And Godwin was good.
To your point. Yeah, Godwin was coming off a 1,000-yard season.
Another league issue, and I've been talking about this, and like yourself, been on a couple other shows around the nation to kind of discussing this topic. My other CFL podcast, it was a topic, but I'm so passionate about it that I don't know. I have to talk to you about it too. So the 1919 tie between the Alouettes and the Calgary Stampeders. I don't know about you, but okay, I agree with the little mini game thing going on. But when it's over, I feel like there are fans in the stands looking around at each other. I believe there's actually players that are looking around at each other and going, it's over? It's done?
Yeah.
What? It's a tie? Is a tie a satisfying end to a game?
It's not. Definitely not. But it goes back to what we just talked about with player safety. They don't want those mini games, so to speak, to go on forever. But perhaps this is something that Randy Ambrosi and the league and the board of governors or the football committee can talk about in the offseason, because I'm with you. I don't think it's satisfying. I think a lot of people, to your point, say, like, what's going on? Players just walking off the field here? It's a tie football game. Like, what? Where they going? So they don't want to play, like, a full quarter, so to speak, because that's adding to the toll. I do think the mini games are the way to go, but perhaps after the first mini game, you can make it so it's something closer to a sudden death result.
This is my little. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to complain about something, I've got to come up with a theory or some type of way to fix the solution. What if they started from midfield? Look, the way I look at it right now is because they're starting at the 35-yard line, you back it up 7, it's a 40, 42-yard field goal. There's not a lot of guys in the league that aren't nailing 42-yarders if they don't even pick up a yard from the 35, right? So to me, and even if they get one first down, it essentially turns into an extra point that these guys are kicking. Rennie Paredes is not going to miss too many extra points, right? Like Mark Laggio is not going to miss too many extra points over the season. Why don't they start at the 55? Because then, to me, and you still do the 2 mini games, but you start at the 55. Then your offense actually has to earn it. And you keep doing the same 2 things. Quarter, you got a touchdown, you got to go for 2-point conversion. Would that help?
I like it. Let's do it, man. We'll get it going on 3DownNation. We'll talk to the commissioner.
Yes.
2025, baby. I actually really like that idea. Right. And you start at the 55, which is uniquely Canadian.
Right. There you go. Sticking with Canadian football, wow. I don't know if a lot of people saw this coming. I of course, I got a little bit from Daly, from Mike Daly, so I've been heard a little bit about the Golden Hawks. Laurier 43, Western 28. Woo! Wow.
It wasn't that close, though.
That's what I'm saying. And I heard it wasn't even that close. I don't know how Greg Marshall's feeling right about now. But I know the way the Laurier Golden Hawks are feeling. First, number 1 ranking in the nation in, I believe, 30 years.
Since 1995.
And they got this guy at quarterback by the name of Taylor Elgersma. Can you tell me about this kid?
My goodness, my man. I'm so happy you brought this up. Taylor Elgersma might have the best arm talent that I've seen in my time covering Canadian university football. And that includes some guys like Michael O'Connor, who was at the University of British Columbia by way of Penn State, transferred back up here. I thought his arm talent was great, but Taylor Elgersma might be another level. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a soapbox here, but Taylor Elgersma deserves a shot with an NFL team.
Whoa.
If you switch Taylor Elgersma without knowing who they were, with Curtis Rourke, Canadian quarterback at Indiana University, would you know that there's a difference, right? Big, tall, physical guys, more athletic than they're given credit for, more pocket passers, but can scoot out there when they need to. I don't think you would notice a difference. And Curtis Rourke, rightfully so, is getting a lot of hype down the United States, just diced up UCLA. And people think that perhaps Indiana can compete for a Big Ten championship. Now, I'm not saying that you could say Taylor Elgersma would go down there and do exactly what Rourke has done, but this is my point, is that the level of play in U Sports has become so good that more and more the NFL is looking up here. And I think that Taylor Elgersma deserves that shot. He should easily be a first-round pick, if not the first overall pick, in the 2025 CFL draft. He's got that type of special arm talent. If you go look on my Twitter feed, at JDunk12, I've highlighted this a number of times, and I'm going to make it my personal campaign to get some of these big U.S. College All-Star games, like the Senior Bowl, like the Shrine Game, like the Tropical Bowl, the Hula Bowl, to bring this kid in, because I think he's got that type of talent. He was training at a place called QB Country down in Alabama that had the likes of Drake May come through there. Big-time quarterbacks, right? Who's with the Patriots, was the 3rd overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Big-time quarterbacks have come through there and trained there. They thought enough to actually allow the kid to come in and train there. Like, they're just not taking anybody in there, okay? And there's a lot of talk about these QB gurus and, you know, how good they are and the rest. But the fact that he's at a similar place to a guy who's a 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft tells me that QB Country thinks he's got some legit skills. So Taylor Elgersma is legit. You should go out and watch him now when you get the chance. Against Mac in the first game of the season, I wanted to go and see him live there, watch how he performed. He didn't blow the chart off by any means because I think Mac was playing some heavy coverage and making him take those underneath throws. But you look at that game against Western, 24 of 29, 385, 2 touchdowns in the air, no interceptions, nothing that was even close to being an interception. He cuts it in to some tight windows that were super impressive, that is rarely seen at this level or any level of football, I would argue. And, oh, by the way, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. This guy's unbelievable, man.
Well, I mean, I had to look at some of the. Obviously, I watched part of the game and then saw what you guys put together on 3DownNation. We're borrowing here. Thank you very much.
You bet, my man.
And you're right. The tight windows. And people got to forget throwing that out pattern in this league is so difficult. And he is putting mustard on the ball. I mean, look at this. Look at the pocket presence, and then feels it out, and then boop, there you go. Like, I love what is coming with this kid. And then, as you said, you take a look at the arm talent. Then you mix in the fact he's 6'6"?
Yep.
Like, isn't that what the NFL are looking for and have been looking for forever? I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him, but this is the kind of the basics that the NFL quarterbacks. And I know there has been some change. They're looking at smaller guys. I mean, Kyler Murray and guys like that have made the grade. Drew Brees, obviously 6 foot even. Guys like that have done very, very well. But the NFL fall in love with those big arm, strong arm quarterbacks. Boy, this kid has apparently all the tools.
It seems like it. And now what's going to be held against him to balance this out a little bit is the fact that he's playing in Canada. The fact that there hasn't been a quarterback from this country go down and make waves in the NFL, right? So you get into the politics of the NFL. You get into people's jobs being on the line from a scouting staff perspective and general manager if you bring this kid in. But I'm saying even as an undrafted free agent, I think he deserves a look. Give him the opportunity down there. Part of what he was doing when he was at QB country was learning the American game in preparation for potentially going down to one of these U.S. college all-star games, because that film is going to be worth a lot, right? Scouts are going to look at him dicing up defenses up here, and they're going to say, well, there's been a bunch of quarterbacks over the years that have put up gaudy numbers up here but haven't really warranted NFL interest. But I think Canadian University football is at a different point now where there's a respect, at least among some NFL franchises, for the game that's being played up here. Look no further than the University of British Columbia. Last year had 2 offensive linemen earn NFL opportunities. Giovanni Manu gets picked by the Detroit Lions. They trade a higher round pick the next year to get, I think it was a 4th round pick, to select him. Dan Campbell absolutely loves him. They used to call that guy Baby Shack, by the way, when he played high school basketball out in BC. He's a monster, an absolute monster, and I think has a potential to be a starter down the road for the Lions. And then Theo Benedette became quickly developed cult hero, we'll call him, on Hard Knocks with the Chicago Bears, the Canadian Eagle, right? Singing in the rookie show and then stripping down to a Speedo with the American Eagle on it. He's earned his way in there with Chicago. And that's, just a couple of recent examples, right? You have Tavius Robinson, who was at the University of Guelph. Ole Miss comes and takes him. Then he gets selected by the Baltimore Ravens, and he's playing meaningful snaps for the Ravens. You have Dean Leonard, who was at the University of Calgary, sort of similar thing, goes to Ole Miss, gets looked at there. So there are a number of players that play Canadian University football that have this elite ability to play in the NFL. And that's no slight to the CFL, because I think Taylor Elgersma should get a shot there too. But more and more the NFL is starting to respect the game up here. Another example, Isaiah Knight, running back with UBC, the San Francisco 49ers, who know a thing or two about running the football with Kyle Shanahan and the backs that they got there, Christian McCaffrey, to name one, asked for film of Knight from UBC after they were scouting Manu and Benedette. So there's a trickle-down effect here, that some guys can get seen who maybe otherwise wouldn't have been seen, I should say, because of Manu and Benedette, for example, getting those looks. So I think Taylor Elgersma absolutely deserves it. I know Michael Faulds, the head coach there, feels the same way.
Quarterback.
And Faulds knows what it's like. He went from John F. Ross High School in Guelph, which is where I played my high school ball, to St. Andrews College in Toronto, won, I believe it was a Metro Bowl or Golden Horseshoe Bowl, goes down to the University of Toledo, where he was a backup to who? Bruce Gradkowski. Not a lot of people might know who that is, but Gradkowski had a lengthy NFL career. Exactly. Yeah. So Faulds knows what he's talking about when he says these things, and he believes that Elgersma deserves at least the opportunity to compete at that level and believes he can play at that level, and I do too.
Just quickly there, just you brought up a name there that just, boy, it's so funny because now I think TSN did a big feature about Robinson this weekend with David Naylor. And I thought to myself, boy, I remember doing, because I was on the Mac broadcast for 3 or 4 years there, and thinking to myself, oh my God. Look at the stance of this guy, and we've seen lots of guys, long, lean, the arms, the strength or whatever, but they don't have it's not a complete package, especially at that level. And I thought I was like, this guy reminds me. I can't believe I actually said this on the broadcast, and I'm glad he's playing in the NFL because I did say this. I go, this guy could be the next Charles Haley. Like his body type, it was that dominant, and he was that much. He deserved double coverage or guards and tackles, or at least someone to chip him off the edge because he was that dangerous. If you had one-on-one blocking on him, it better be your best offensive lineman, or he's going to crush your quarterback.
Oh, man.
He's going to crush your quarterback. So I'm just so happy about his story and to see the way these guys are doing well. And now, as you said, Curtis Rourke also getting a lot of chatter as well too. Just one last thing here with the university stuff. McMaster Marauders 1-3 right now, coming off, I believe, back-to-back 2-6 seasons, no playoffs. You've been around the OUA for a long time, and the McMaster Marauders have always contended for a playoff spot. I would have to believe they have to make the playoffs this year. They got to get on a little run here.
It's surprising, honestly. You're right. You're usually used to seeing McMaster, be in the playoffs, get in there, perhaps make some noise, and obviously the great years where they were in multiple Vania Cups and won the Vania Cup in 2011. This team, I feel like, is younger though. There's some quality there with Keegan Hall and some of the receivers that he has. They played Laurier really close. They just had a close loss with Guelph, who I think is, unbiasedly on the come up with Mark Soria, the head coach there. So I think it's just the fact that the competition level in the OUA, I think, has gotten better and better. And I want to shout out Dexter Janke at York University for raising the level there. York is not the doormat that they once were. They might be getting beat, but it's not just this walk in, lay down 50, 60, 70 points on York and walk out. And I think that's what's happening here is that the competition level for everybody has been raised, and Mac needs to make sure that they're keeping pace.
Yeah, they certainly do, because it seems strange to me because it was just all, hey, you and I were working together at this station here. We're in 2019 when they had a real nice run, winning the Yates, and then had to got out west, and we're playing guys like Phil Pott, with the Phil Pott brothers with Calgary, and that's where their run ended. I believe that was the Mitchell Bowl that year. But yeah, it just seems strange to see them sort of struggling, and it's good that they finally got a win there against U of T this past weekend. But boy, it's just you want to see them get going again because they have such a tradition. And again, I think of Steph Potasic and I think of a winner. But eventually, all things, again, do come to an end if you don't get into the playoffs or at least win. So we'll be closely monitoring that situation. Hey, Justin, love talking football. We could go for hours and hours and hours. We can talk about every level. We didn't even touch about the NFL, really, of what's going on there. Go Bills!
Hey.
But, it's a pleasure to have you in here, and I think it's great to see you expanding your talents out there with this rabid fan base out in Regina. Like I said, I love going on the fact you can go on YouTube, or even if I'm in my car, because I listen to all the broadcasters around the nation, and I hear you chatting with those wild fans after a loss. It's always so fun because I think you've said it several times, is that one of the things that you love is Canadian football, and that without it, you wouldn't be maybe the man you are right now doing all the things you do. So it's great to see you fulfilling dreams and just continuing to grow.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on and hyping up the pre- and post-game show with the Riders on 620 CKRM. You can get on there on YouTube, as you mentioned, youtube.com/@sportscage.com, and check us out there, man. Just always good to talk ball with you and chop it up and see you.
Yeah, great to see you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you.
All right, folks, that's your Sportsline Podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking to people that are in the know. Friends, if you do know of an athlete, team, or accomplishment that needs some recognition, the Sportsline Podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, share, subscribe buttons, and we certainly encourage you to comment. Also, please check out all the informative podcasts CHCH have to offer, like Trending Now and Newsmaker with Louis Butko. for the outstanding people behind the camera that put the Sportsline podcast to air on a daily basis. We thank you so very much, folks, and we'll see you tomorrow.